Hello and welcome to this InflectraCON 2023 virtual bonus session. InflectraCON will be held from April 19th through the 21st in Washington, D.C. on the campus of Gallaudet University. We are looking forward to 3 days of customer training, partner meetings, industry sessions, networking, and more. Check us out at www.inflectracon.com. This session is being presented by Mesut Durukal, Quality Assurance Automation Engineer at Indeed. Let's get started with this virtual bonus session entitled Building Quality.
Hello, welcome to InflectraCON. I'm very happy to be a part of this amazing conference. I like talking about Agile, I like talking about quality assurance. So it will be a good chance for us to discuss about ways to improve the processes that we are following to build our products or deliver the best product for our customers or the end users. So basically we will talk about building quality. My name is Mesut Durukal. I'm a quality assurance engineer, and as most of my colleagues are doing nowadays, I'm most of the time doing the test automation and trying to implement test cases to execute them in an automated manner in the pipelines. In this way, we can do the continuous testing, because nowadays we are not having big releases or seasonal releases, but instead we are having continuous deliveries. Almost every day we are implementing new features. Or even if we are not implementing new features, we can do some refactorings or the updates on the working functionalities or the existing features. But what we can do, or what we have to do, is after each these changes or updates, we have to ensure that these frequent updates do not break the working functionality. So this is why continuous testing is very important. And of course, to be able to cope with this challenge, test automation is very important, because with solely manual testing efforts, it's not possible to catch up the comprehensive scope. There are lots of different aspects of quality. It's not even only functionality. It is sometimes the performance of the product or the system, or usability, resilience, how responsive it is. So there are lots of different aspects of quality. So in short, we are trying to do test automation as much as possible. And of course, not only that, on top of that, manual testing is still very important. So we will discuss about lots of different aspects of the quality within the talk as well. And I'm leaving some socials here, so please feel free to contact to me anytime, or reach out for your questions, recommendations, or just feel free to get connected. So we will talk about different aspects of quality, and I will try to categorize them under some fundamentals. But before starting, just as a heads up, first of all, before building our strategy, before building our architecture, there are some different things to consider, because if we start our architecture in a different way, in a wrong way, then after some time it will be really difficult to fix. So it is very essential to start in the correct direction. So to do that, of course, there are lots of different considerations we can do. For example, we can think about our dependencies or the materials that we already have. For example, we will talk about tooling. So if we already have some tools paid by our companies or organizations, then we don't maybe have to consider some other options. We can still consider some improvements and some alternatives to the tools or the ways that we are doing. But of course, if there are already some paid solutions, this will be some aspect that we should keep in mind. And of course, there is the milestones or the deadlines we have to consider. For example, how often we are doing the deliveries, or in what ways we are doing our releases or the deployments. For example, we are just directly pushing to the production environment, or are we using any other stages like QA or deployment, development environments, or especially how often we are doing all these activities will be a important decision criteria for, especially for our automation strategy. And of course, the budget and the resources that we have are the other dimensions to build our strategy. So after this heads up, let's a little bit talk about the fundamental pillars of quality. So the first fundamental that we will talk about is the teamwork, the holistic quality approach. Because by individual efforts, we cannot achieve our quality approach or the quality goals, the objectives. So the holistic team approach is very important. So the whole team contribution and the whole team alignment, we will discuss in what direction we should motivate ourselves, and encourage the team efforts. We will talk about, and then we will a little bit talk about building some strategical decisions, especially the tooling that we are using or the other workflows, the other processes we have to follow. We will talk about in what ways we can build these processes, and maybe we will talk about some test design strategy, because test coverage is very important in terms of quality. So we will talk about in what ways we can improve our test effectiveness. And we will talk about the monitoring activities, because it is important to keep us on the correct track. We will collect a lot of data and information. We will do data mining, and we will collect some insights from these data mining activities. We can investigate the bugs we have. We can collect all the issues reported from all the parties, including the development or the testing activities, or even from the issues reported from the production environments. After collecting those information, we can do lots of different clustering or the categorization activities, and we can find lots of different action items which will help us or enable us to improve our processes. And then finally, we will a little bit talk about the efficiency of our activities. And at this part, it will be mostly focused on the test automation, because as we discussed in the first part, test automation is a very important part of the software testing lifecycle, because we will still do manual testing activities even if we reach to 100% test automation. The manual testing is not ignorable, but still, if we don't have test automation at all, it will be very difficult to complete all the activities. So test automation is important, but again, even if we have test automation, we will continue our exploratory testing activities or other manual testing activities to improve that. But the test automation itself should be efficient in the first place, because if it is not reliable, if we cannot rely on the results coming from automated test executions, or if they are working very slowly, for example, the completion of the whole test execution is very long, the duration is not in the accepted levels, then it means that maybe we are not doing the test automation efficiently. So we will talk about in what ways we can improve the efficiency of the test automation. So let's get started with the first pillar, which is the teamwork, the holistic quality assurance approach. First of all, we have to align all the team in the correct direction, which is the quality mindset. But in what way, which direction we should align the whole team, or what mindset we should encourage in the whole team? Let's a little bit talk about this. As the quality assurance engineers or the test engineers, we are sometimes acting as the quality advocates or the quality coach, which means we have to encourage all the levels testing, for example, not only system level testing, but also sometimes integration or the unit testing activities. And we have to encourage the early QA involvement. So these are all the things that we can do in terms of the quality coaching. But first of all, we have to talk about the quality mindset, which is closely related to the customer's perspective, focusing on the customer usage. Because sometimes, as we know, Agile encourages working functionality or working a product is more important than the comprehensive documentation. This is very true. This is very acceptable. But sometimes there may be some misunderstanding, and we can misinterpret this. It doesn't mean that we don't need any documentation at all. So if that is the case, sometimes there may be some misunderstandings, or there might be some different opinions on the usages of the features. For example, everyone has a common understanding about the basic features or the specifications, but sometimes when I ask some specific questions regarding the details of some features, I'm getting some different answers. For example, especially the negative cases, and when I ask what should be the expected result after performing these kind of steps, there are some different opinions raising from the team. So what I mean is we have to clarify all these kind of wake points, because otherwise we will be maybe missing the customer orientation, because not only verifying all the functionality, but also validating them is very important. These are the two very fundamental aspects of quality assurance: verification and validation. So building all the features working properly is one thing, but ensuring that these are really the features which are needed by the customers or the end users is another aspect. So even though something is working very well or without any bugs, maybe that is not something which is the users will be using at all. So sometimes we are having some features which are not used by the end users at all. So this will cause some extra maintenance efforts. So after doing some analysis, we can find out that there are some features which are already obsolete. So we can reduce them, eliminate them to have a better maintenance activities and improve our efficiency. So there are lots of different ways to improve our customer focus and to understand what are the expected behaviors from the end users. So maybe we can do some surveys, we can do exploratory activities, or we can visit their production environment, their real usage environment, or we can at least talk to our business or operations teams to understand the feelings or the feedback coming from the end users, to have a sense of end user perspective and the customer focus. And of course, not only verification and validation, we can raise lots of different initiatives to make our users even happier. For example, we can more think about our coverage, or we can think about our priorities. What kind of features are mostly used by the customers, or what are them, which portion of them are most critical, or which of them are more visible to the end users. So we can do all these kind of analysis efforts, and eventually, after considering these different aspects, the criticality and the visibility, we can come up with some priority levels for our test cases or the features or the specifications. And one thing that we can that we can consider to close our test coverage activities is thinking about the testability issues. Because most of the time, if we have some test coverage gaps, maybe the reason is some testability issues. If we are not able to test some features, then we can just leave them as open, and it means that those features or the use cases will not be covered by some test cases. I wanted to highlight especially the testability issues. This is because this is something else which we can achieve by the whole team efforts. Because as the quality assurance members, if you are given a product and if you are asked to test all the aspects of this, maybe sometimes in some perspectives you will not have chance to test the whole expected results or the conditions, because sometimes you will not be able to trigger the condition to test the expected steps. There will be some pre-requirements. So in these cases, if you have any dependencies, for example, if this is a subsystem, that what we are talking about, and if there are some other subsystems in the whole application, and if you don't have access to create some objects or send some requests to the other parts of the whole system, maybe sometimes you will not be able to trigger the interactions coming to this subsystem. So you cannot, first of all, create the preconditions. Of course, we can do some mock activities, or we can fake the request coming from the other subsystems, other parts of the application. But still, mocking might not be the optimum solution. So what we can do is we can talk to the development teams and ask them to think about testability even in the first place. So this is the importance of early QA involvement. We can already attend to the design meetings or the requirement analysis studies, and in that way we can raise our voice about the testability. If there are any other concerns which will block us to complete our quality assurance activities, we can already put them on table, and we can already think about improving the testability. For example, if we don't have access rights, we can request them, or even maybe sometimes if we cannot see the objects or the results which will be created in the other parts of the system, we may ask for additional public interfaces. There can be any API or UI, and in this way we can ensure that as the testers, we will be seeing the results by calling those public interfaces. Even if they will not be used by the end users, they will not be used in production, just for testing purposes, we can make this additional request, and we can try to improve the testability. Since we are already talking about the collaboration in the test automation is another aspect that we can improve in our team, because it is not necessarily done by only the quality assurance members, but also it can be done by the developers in all levels, including the system level or even integration or unit testing level. So by encouraging everyone to contribute in test automation or the other coding activities in terms of improvement of the quality assurance, we can encourage everyone, we can coach other people in the team, and we can still ensure a holistic approach in terms of quality assurance. So after the first pillar, let's a little bit talk about the second pillar of the quality, which is building correct strategies. First of all, starting with the tooling that we have. On this slide, I have an example to depict how many options we can leverage in our test automation environments or the quality assurance environments. For example, we can build some pipelines in which the systems or the applications we are developing are first built and then starts to execute on some working environments. And then we can create several jobs to execute our test cases on these pipelines. If any test stage is not failing, then we can allow our changes or updates to be merged in the main branch. But otherwise, if we realize that there is something failing, then we can understand, we can do the root cause analysis. And then after deciding if this is a false alarm or a real failure, then we can still decide on the letting the release candidate go in production or block the release. And then, of course, there will be some repositories in which we can manage our code, and there are some tools to manage our dependencies. And after running our test cases, of course, there will be lots of different virtual machines in which these executions are done, because we may want to cover different operating systems, or even we may cover different browsers. For example, especially for the front-end automation, most of the users may use different versions or different products. For example, maybe some of them are using Chrome, but some others are using Firefox, or even Microsoft Edge or Safari browsers can be used by different users. So this may require to create different virtual machines. For example, if we want to use, for example, only Microsoft Edge, then we may need some Windows machines. But otherwise, we can use Linux or some other operating system machines. So after creating all these virtual machines, we can start our executions and we can do parallelization. We can start lots of different suites running in parallel. And of course, the automated tests which will run in these suites can be built by utilizing lots of different frameworks or libraries. For example, even for the test runner, we can pick another option, but for managing the test results and reporting them, we can choose another reporting module. And for the UI or the API testing activities, we can use lots of different libraries. And especially for the UI, nowadays we have several options. This is one initiative that we have recently done in our team, which was choosing the best option. Because when we are talking about building a framework from scratch, we can choose lots of different options, including the language as well, programming language. But when we are talking about modern E2E test automation frameworks, everything is already in place. For example, they already have a test runner inside, and they already have a reporter. For example, there are lots of different frameworks based on JavaScript nowadays, including Cypress, Playwright, Test Cafe, or any other option. So what we have done recently is we have done a benchmark study to decide which one is the best for us. So I'm not saying any of those is the best in general, but what we can do is first, this is a call for action for everyone. First, list our requirements or the needs to automate our test cases, and then try to find out which one is meeting our conditions or the requirements. For example, if you need to run your test cases on all the browsers, including Safari or the WebKit, maybe some of them will not be supporting all of them. Or maybe if you have some specific features like the opening a new tab or opening a new window, or even file upload, file download operations, some of those options will not be supporting these features. And of course, execution speed is another aspect that we can consider. We can see which one is working faster or slower. And of course, the ease of coding and the understandability in all those frameworks, we can do a comprehensive benchmark study, and we can decide which one to go, based of course on the team structure as well. For example, if team is already familiar with a specific programming language, we can make our choice on top of this criteria or the situation. And finally, of course, reporting is very important, because after we execute our test cases, the public visible reports are very important. A historical test data I'm talking about, because sometimes we want to track the flakiness. Tracking flakiness means at what time tests start to fail, and at what time or how often it is failing. So in this way, if we have only the last execution but not the previous one, then maybe we cannot do such an analysis. But if we have the historical test data, and if we have a dashboard on which we can easily track the flakiness and all the other metrics of the executions, for example, execution duration, individual test case speeds, and all the other aspects, then it will already ease us to make our improvements in our executions. And after the tools that we are using, of course, the processes that we are following is something else that we can, on which we can build a good strategy. For example, in what time we can start our testing activities? What is the acceptance criteria for start testing in integration level, for example? Or what is the criteria to close an activity? For example, what is the exit criteria from the integration test? Maybe which will be, in the meantime, the acceptance criteria for the system level testing. Or even for the other development activities, what is our definition of done? Or what are some other aspects that we want to do? For example, what kind of reviews or the demonstration ceremonies we want to do to complete our activities. All these kind of workflows and the processes that we are following to complete our actions are something very important to be a part of our strategy, because if we don't build all these aspects, maybe it will already affect the communication in the team. Because if we are not setting all these criteria, the acceptance or the exit criteria or the definition of dance, maybe we will be missing some guards, the safety guards, and maybe we will be missing some aspects of the completion of all these activities or the tasks. All right, so now we can know which tools we can use, or what conditions are met to start our activities, or in what condition or when can we complete our activities. But the next question would be, who will do that, or in what way they can decide what to include in the execution suites, because infinite testing is not possible. So in each level we have to decide a subset. So we have to, for example, while doing our regression testing activities, we should select the correct subset, which is meeting with the changed or updated behaviors or the features. So if we are choosing the wrong scope, then maybe we will still be having some coverage leakages or the coverage gaps. So deciding on the correct subset is very important. And in these terms, again, the prioritization is one of the things that we can improve or try to build in the correct way. For example, we can think about, again, different dimensions. For example, criticality, what kind of impact it will have if we have this issue, or it will be visible or seen by which people, or what kind of users, which profiles, or how important it will be. All these kind of aspects we can consider, and eventually we can come up with different priority levels of test cases. And by tagging them relevant to the some specific features, whenever some features are updated or changed or even refactored, we can choose the correct test set in different levels. So assigning all these different activities to the correct group, and when we clarify who will do these kind of activities and in what way they can perform these activities, will be a good improvement which we can do in the team, and which will affect the efficiency of our activities. Because if somehow we miss the performing of the unit tests, and if we try to cover everything in the system level, of course it will be an anti-pattern we should avoid. And of course we cannot cover everything in the system level, because we know the all the testing window is much more narrower in the upper levels, and we don't have enough resources to complete all these activities in a very limited time. This is again from the nature of agile. In a very limited time, like maybe 1 week, 2 weeks at the end of the sprint, we expect to have a working minimum viable product, minimum shippable product, and we are supposed to have some working functionalities, and of course verified and validated functionalities. And if we are not starting our testing preparations in the meantime that the development activities are started, then most probably we will be behind the schedule, and at the end of the sprint maybe we will not be completing all the testing activities. Again, this is one thing that we can think from the team perspective, and the communication in the team. Because if we are not having a good communication channel, if development team is working on some functionalities and the quality assurance members are not aware of this implementation or the development tasks, then they cannot start their preparation in the meantime. But if they are already notified, even in the first place, then they can already start all the different perspectives of testing activities, and they can start to catch all the quality assurance tasks completion at the end of this limited testing window. And finally, in this session, let's a little bit talk about the test design strategy. Because if you realize we are talking about, or we are trying to cover all the stages of the software testing lifecycle, starting from the early requirement analysis and then test design and then implementation or execution of test cases in either way, in either manual or automated manners, and finally the continuous maintenance. So this one we will talk about test design, because the test execution and the implementation we will already talk about in the next parts of the presentation. So what can we do to improve our test design coverage is we can think from lots of different perspectives. For example, we can consider or imagine in what ways the end users will interact with this system, or what kind of profiles will be using this system. And thinking from this way, we can introduce lots of different testing types. For example, we can do the static testings, which is like maybe the checking the code health and other code quality checks. And then we can do the dynamic testing activities as well, introducing lots of different strategies. For example, to cover lots of different data values and different data formats, we can do a boundary value analysis, and we can use equivalence partitioning to cover different portions of data. Because, for example, if we ensure that a feature is working well with a specific data value, it doesn't mean that it will work with all the supposed or supported data values, data boundaries. For example, if we ensure that data upload features working well with string values, how about integer or other double or float values? Because if this is supposed to be supported by the feature, maybe some of the users will try these kind of usages. So to improve our coverage, we can utilize or leverage lots of different test design techniques, and we can ensure that we are covering the correct scope. And as I briefly mentioned, creating lots of different profiles which are supposed to use this system may give some different ideas. For example, when we think about different user profiles, we can come up with the idea that maybe for some of them, accessibility is very important, but maybe for some of them, some others, supporting different platforms, execution platforms, even the mobile and the desktop versions, or different browsers, or different device support is very important. So in these terms, maybe the compatibility will be very important. So when we think from different user profiles, it may give some different ideas to design some different test scenarios, or maybe even think about different aspects of quality. Because quality is not, again, only functionality, but also the performance and the usability, or the compatibility, or even the resilience and the robustness of the system. So we should cover all these different dimensions or the aspects of the quality to make our users even happy and comfortable using this product or the application. So the third pillar of the quality is the monitoring activities. And why monitoring activities is important? Because it will enable us to make a current evaluation. In this way, we can evaluate our current situation. how well we are already doing. Or are we already in the correct track, or we are maybe going in a completely wrong way, so we can understand. And on the other hand, we can do a future estimation with a linear projection. We can understand what kind of the tasks we can complete going with the same pace, or we can understand if we have to reduce the scope, if we already understand that we will not be able to complete all the tasks in the designated sprint, or maybe at the end of the deadlines, because we can understand that, for example, after 1 week, if we are completing only 1/3 or 1/4 of the tasks, then if we go with the same pace, maybe we will not be completing all of the items at the end of the second week. So this will be a linear projection, and these kind of monitoring activities will give us a lot of ideas and insights. For example, I'm giving some example generally while talking about monitoring activities. For me, it looks very similar to driving a car. For example, when we are in a journey in going from somewhere to another place, and while we are driving, we have lots of different metrics which we can show in front of us, right? We have a monitoring panel in front of the driver, and we can collect and show lots of different data. For example, we can see the temperature within the vehicle, or even the temperature of the motors, or we can see the health of the tires. For example, we can check the air pressure, or lots of different things. For example, the level of the gas or oil in the tanks. And we can take some action items if we already realize that gas is already very less and we need to renew it, we need to add some extra resource, then we can stop by in the next station and we can add some resources, as we can do in our testing activities. Or for our quality assurance activities, maybe we can reconsider the scope. For example, we can change or update or modify the target we want to achieve. If we already understand that it will not be reasonable or feasible with the current resources or the tools or materials that we already have. Okay, it makes sense, but what kind of metrics we can collect? Because even on this slide, after I put a couple of metrics, actually it is not a couple of them, but there are lots of different metrics that we can collect. But how can we manage them? Because there are plenty of them, and trying to collect all of them may not be reasonable, and we might even be lost among all these kind of metrics, because maybe some of them are irrelevant to our goals. So what we can do is, first of all, we can figure out our priorities. What is our main goal and objective? For example, just as a practical example, in one of my recent projects, we were really concentrated on reducing the total execution duration, because we realized that especially we had some hardware modules, and especially onboarding those hardware modules were taking too much time. So what we have done is, first of all, we collect lots of different metrics directly related to the execution durations. For example, after checking the whole suite execution duration, we analyzed all the individual test case execution durations, and we figured out which specific test cases were taking too much time. And then we listed all the root causes, what were stemming to or resulting in this long durational test executions. And then we collect some different metrics, like even the execution durations on different platforms. What happens when we run in the pipeline, or what happens if we run in the local environments? In this way, we can understand if the platform was causing this slowly running test, or maybe there were some other reasons. So we can figure out which metrics can support our ideas, and after listing all of them, we can start collecting them and doing some POCs, start to try some proposals or solutions. And then again, we can adapt our solutions, and we can again examine or observe if these POCs are changing the metrics in the either in the positive or the negative way, or even maybe they are not making any difference at all. So in this way, we can understand if our improvement experiments are contributing in coping with these kind of problems. But another thing that we can improve our monitoring activities is trying to improve the visibility or the accuracy, because again, we may have different platforms or tools that we can use to manage our tasks or the issues. But if we don't have the correct visibility or the transparency on these tools, maybe we will be missing some information. For example, if we want to see all the progress on the test life cycle, for example, even starting from the design of the test cases, and then how much time we are spending on the implementation of these tasks, these tests to be make them automated, or even for the code reviews, how much time are we spending? So if we try to see all this time we are spending on each stage of the whole testing life cycle, we have to see all this progress on our issue tracking systems. For example, if we don't have all the relevant status, then we won't be seeing all these state transition diagrams. For example, on issue tracking system, maybe there are some default values, like first of all, whenever we create a ticket, first of all it is open, and then it is in progress, and then maybe it is done or closed. This might be coming from by default templates, but we can already customize this lifecycle according to our processes. So we can already add one more status on the test tickets, which may be like maybe in design, or which may be under code review. So if we all add the status, and if we keep all tasks up to date, then we will be able to see all this progress. Whenever we pull a ticket from our issue tracking system, we can see the timestamp on which it was changed from InDesign to designed, or we can see the timestamp on which it was changed from under code review to merged. So with all the by doing all this analysis, we can understand the individual the individual durations that we are spending on each phase, and we can do our monitoring activities properly. And finally, some dashboards and visual graphs will help us to understand, because numbers are great. They will already tell us a lot of information. But if we have even some visual graphs or other monitoring tools or dashboards, then it will be already very straightforward to see what's happening in our environments. For example, if we have some line charts or other trends graphs, then we can understand how the trend is going. It is going either upwards or downwards, or we can track all the other metrics. For example, if they are violating the limits that we already set, so we can even set some alarms on these tools or platforms. For example, we can use lots of different tools, and we can set already some notifications. For example, if this data is violating the limits that we are setting, then the users can be notified from these platforms. So it will be pretty easy to understand what's going on after analyzing all these visuals. Especially from the bugs, we can learn a lot. After analyzing them, we can understand the categories of the bugs, or the priority levels, the criticality of levels, or even their severity categorization we can do. And in this ways, for example, we can understand from which category we are having the bugs mostly. For example, most of the time, are the functional related bugs are reported by the users or the testers or developers, or maybe they are mostly the performance related bugs. So in this way, we can understand our issues and the improvement rooms. For example, if we are having mostly the performance related bugs, maybe there is some issue in our load balancers, or there is any missing point we can do when we are doing our deployments. So we can try to take some preventive action items to avoid these kind of situations in our future activities. And of course, not only the issues or the bugs that are reported, but from the production environments as well, we can collect a lot of information or data based on lots of different metrics. For example, we can measure the response times from different pages or different services that we are developing, and we can try to observe in what conditions, or for example, are there any other certain time slot in which the services or our parts of subsystems of the product is becoming unresponsive. So these kind of things we can try to observe, and by adding some additional preventive action items, we may try to provide a better usability or a better user experience to our end users. So the last pillar of the quality is the efficiency. And as I told in the beginning, we will try to focus on test automation. Of course, it doesn't mean that we can improve the efficiency only on the test automation activities. We can improve efficiency related to all the quality assurance tasks. But since test automation is having a big place on the whole quality assurance, we will a little bit focus on that. And we will try to find ways to improve the efficiency of the whole automation lifecycle. So it starts from the implementation. First of all, how much time are we spending, or how efficient we are doing on test implementations. And then after the tests are already implemented, we execute them. So the execution, how efficiently we are doing the execution itself, and then the maintenance is another part of this whole life cycle. So basically it is implementation, execution, and maintenance. So let's start from the last one, which is the maintenance, because it can be in any time. For example, even after we start implementation, or even long time after we already implement, we may need some continuous maintenance, because sometimes whenever the behaviors or the features are updated, tests are also affected, because we already know that we are working in agile and we are very open for changes. So customers can request some additional features or functionalities, or even they can request to change the existing or working functionality. It is very okay, it's very understandable, because this is just a change request, so we can update and modify the behaviors. But it means we have to update our test cases as well after these changes, because otherwise we will not be covering the correct scope. But if our test cases are not maintainable enough, if we are struggling to update our test cases after those kind of feature changes or behavior changes, then it means maybe we are not implementing or maintaining our test cases in an efficient way. So what we can do is we can try to implement them in a maintainable way. And even if the features are changed or updated, then our test cases should be still robust and reliable. But even if not, we should be easily updating them, because otherwise we will be losing a lot of time, and it will be a waste of time and effort in the meantime. So what we can do is, especially the front-end automation testers know this problem very well, or the challenge very well. Especially the locators of the elements are something that we can try to improve, because when we are doing some manual testing efforts, or even when we are using the system manually, what we are doing is we are navigating to the URLs or the just web pages in the system, and we are interacting with the pages. For example, we are finding some elements visually. We locate by our eyes that where the buttons are or the other user fields are, and then we interact with them. For example, we are providing some user inputs, or maybe we are clicking the buttons, or we are selecting some of the elements. All these are user interactions. But if we want to do the test code to perform all these steps on behalf of us, what we have to do is we have to let the test code know which element we want to interact with. So the way to do that is to locate them, and we can use some different selectors or locators to do that. But the problem here is, if the page layout is changed by the developers, then sometimes the locators are also changed. For example, the class names or the other attributes of the elements can be updated. And if we are designing our locators on top of these attributes, then our test cases would be broken. So what we can do is we can introduce some unique IDs independent from all the other attributes of the element. For example, even if the class name or the class attribute is changed after the page layout update, the unique ID will be still same. So if we introduce this, and if we talk to the development teams, and if we make an agreement to use this kind of unique IDs after they implement a new element on the page, then it will be already improving the test reliability. Another aspect of the maintainability is the reusability, because if we have a lot of duplication in our test automation framework, it means when we need a change or update in the test automation framework, as we just discussed, sometimes we will need it. And when we have to apply a fix in the test code, we have to do that on each of these duplicates. But in other way, if we are developing or building some reusable test code, then it means we can run the same test case in lots of different configurations. And in this case, it will already reduce the maintenance effort, and we don't have to apply the fix in lots of different places, but on a single test case, and all the executions will be already reflected by this fix. So what we can do is we can exclude all the configurational variables from the test code itself. And by doing that with a proper configuration management, we can execute the same test case on lots of different configurations. For example, we can change the browser on which we are running the test code, or we can even change the stage, and even the applications that we are testing can be changed. Because in this way, we can dynamically generate the URLs that we are navigating to, or we can even choose the locators dynamically after reading the configurational variables or the execution parameters and arguments passed by the executions. So in this way, we will be reducing the duplications and the maintenance cost, but we will be increasing the reusability. And after the maintenance, the test reliability is another aspect of the quality, and it means how much we can rely on the test results. For example, if a feature is working properly, but our test case is failing, which means it is reporting a failure, then it means it is not a real bug, because normally the feature is working properly, but our test case is failing, so it is a false alarm. So in this way, we will stop the pipeline, and we have to understand and do the root cause analysis. So it will be already some waste of time, and of course the maintenance effort. And on the other hand, if the feature is not working properly, which means there is an issue, or there is a weakness, or maybe there is a vulnerability in the feature, but if our test case is not reporting a bug, is not reporting a failure, it is just passing, then it means there is a silent horror case in this situation, because there is a bug, but we are not capable of catching the issue. So most probably we will have an escape bug. It will be reported in the later stages, from maybe from the production environment. So all these things are some test reliability issues, and they stem from test smells. We may have lots of different test smells in automation environments. So what we can do is we can try to list all the possible or potential test smells which may appear in our environments, and we can try and develop some solutions against them to cope with them one by one. But of course, one very important thing is having strong quality gates, because if we are letting everything go in our test automation framework, most probably we will have some test smells. But if we are already doing a good code quality check, and if we are already having a strong quality gates which are stopping the test smells in the first place, then we will not be letting those kind of potential risks which will cause some trouble in the later stages. So code quality checks and doing all the checks, including the static code analysis and the dynamic testing activities, are very important. So in this way, in these terms, we can even utilize some tools. There are some different static code analysis tools, and we can set up these kind of tools servers. And whenever we push our code, then already the codes can be performed. And if there is a vulnerability, it will be blocked, and we will be notified to fix those kind of issues and the weaknesses in the code to improve the code quality. And after doing this checks, of course, we can remove all the flakiness, and the test will be robust. And in our monitoring dashboards, we can already do the flakiness detection or the flakiness tracking. And in this way, we can understand which tests are stable, but which are not, which of them are not. And if we realize that some of them need some attention, we can analyze what is the problem in the test code or test spec file, and we can understand the problems and try to develop some solutions against them. And one last thing to improve the efficiency is not only the execution or the implementation efforts and the maintenance, but also the execution duration. So time is very precious. Let's suppose, for example, if we are running our test cases before each merge request or after each merge request, so which means before we are merging any change in the code in the main branch, if we are running our test cases, and if they are taking too much time, then it means sometimes the development team members will start complaining. I cannot merge my code easily because I have to wait for a long time. and maybe after some time we will have some conflicts. So test execution duration is very important. So what we can do is we can already run some parallel suites, but of course within the spec files we can understand and analyze what parts of the test steps is taking too much time or running slow, and we can try to improve the test execution speed and speed up our executions and delivery activities. So we went through 4 different fundamental pillars of quality, and we talked about improving quality assurance activities, both verification and the validation, two different components and very important components of the quality assurance, and how we can make our customers or the end users happy and comfortable to use by providing them a good user experience on top of a good functionality, because functionality most of the case is the first thing that we concentrate and focus on, but on top of that there are lots of different quality components, including the performance, usability, maintainability, recoverability, or even understandability of all the features and the aspects or the specifications. And what we have talked about is, first of all, building a good teamwork and a holistic team approach. So pulling everyone on the same page, which is aligned with the quality mindset, which was very close to the customer orientation and looking to the product from the customer's perspective and end user's eyes. And then we talked about building some strategical decisions, like even the tools or the frameworks that we are using, or the workflows, the processes that we are following to develop our products, or in what ways, in what technique, by using which kind of techniques we are designing our test cases, we have discussed. And we talked about some monitoring activities, which metrics we can track, or we already know that we cannot track all the metrics, possible metrics, so how we can choose some of them, we have discussed. And eventually, finally, we talked about the test automation and the efficiency of and the effectiveness of our test automation framework, and potential risks like the test mass we may have and ways to cope with them. So I hope everyone can get some insights from all these pillars, and they can find some improvement rooms in their activities, in their processes that they are following. So this could be the call for action. So please go over all the stages of your testing lifecycle or the quality assurance lifecycle, and whenever you find some improvement points, please go ahead and adapt your solutions and observe the results. If they already contribute to the solution or the improvements, please go ahead with these kind of improvements and the solutions. Thanks a lot for listening to me, and if you have any questions or just anything to share, please do not hesitate to reach out, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks for joining us for this virtual bonus session. We hope you enjoyed it. Learn more about InflectraCON, our live, in-person conference from April 19th through the 21st, 2023 in Washington, D.C. by visiting InflectraCON.com. Stay tuned for more great content, news, and events from Inflectra. Learn more at inflectra.com/company.